Baltimore chapter. I'm Amy Maclean, Editorial Director of Cablefax, and I'm going to slide into the panelist role, but I wanted to just take a moment to introduce our panel and thank them for being here today. We have Kristen Thomaselli, who is the founder of boutique communication PR firm Breakthrough 22. We have Tia Mitchell, who is the Washington correspondent for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. And she's the Washington Journal fill-in host at C-SPAN, so you may have seen her on TV now and then. And then we have Seth Arenstein, who is the editor for PR News and Crisis Insider. And fun fact, he used to be the editorial director for Cablefax and hired me, I don't know, a couple years ago, maybe. Right?
You were only 10 years old at the time.
I know.
We contravened all kinds of child labor laws. It was terrible. Actually, Amy, thank you. It was the best hire I ever made, and doing us proud at Cablefax. So Amy brought up that fun fact. I want to go around the panel before we get into our discussion today about the media and putting your best foot forward when dealing with the media. And I like to break the ice by asking each of you. We'll start with Tia. Tell me something about you that is not in your bio. Some fun fact, some trivial fact that is not in your bio, Tia.
Darn, I didn't remember the not in your bio part, so now I have to rethink my answer. Okay, my fun fact will be that my favorite place in DC is this really calm spot in Rock Creek Park that's good for dipping your feet in the water. Ah,
great. Kristen, you're in Northern Virginia, right? Yes. What's your fun fact about yourself that's not in your bio?
So I don't know that this is a fun fact, but for some reason, when you said something not in your bio, the thing that came to mind is I once had a paddleboarding accident where I landed on a bed of sea urchins. And I had to, when I came back to DC, there was a dermatologist in Georgetown and this little old Italian man, and he was cracking up. He's like, I've never seen anything like this. And he had to pull like 200 of their little spikes that had burrowed into my legs. So that's not maybe fun, but it's interesting.
Good trivia. Very good trivia. I like that. Amy.
I'm going to say that I am in my 40s, and for the first time ever during the pandemic, I just kind of went crazy and said, we should get a puppy. I've never had a dog ever. And so we have a black golden doodle named Polo. And if you follow me on social media, I just want to apologize for all the Polo pictures, but I am totally smitten with him.
Okay. You know, I want to begin by, this is kind of maybe a silly question for you, Tia, but I'm just curious. You write for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. You're based in Washington, D.C. How often do you get back to Atlanta, and is that an important part of your writing and your job?
Yes, it's really important. I'm actually going back to Atlanta next week, and I'll be there through the election. I was last there right after Labor Day. I was there in May for our primary. So I go every, couple of months. It is very important for me to go back, stay connected, and I try to do that as much as I can.
Great. Now, I'd like to sort of contrast Amy and Tia in terms of pitching, and one of the topics on our list today. Tia, tell us the type of pitch you are getting usually, or do you get pitches? Do you accept pitches, or do you go out and investigate on your own? The contrast with Amy is that Amy really knows so many of the people in the industry and is friendly with them, probably knows when they have news, when they don't even realize it. But tell us the type of pitch that you get, Tia, and the type of pitch that you appreciate. In other words, one that you will use, as opposed to one about, jewelry stores in Denver that has nothing to do with your political beat.
Yes, and we get, I get so many, soft pitches in the form of just like an email that's probably sent out into the ether to thousands of people. most of it has no relevance to what I do on a day-to-day basis. That's probably dozens of emails a day that fall under that. And then I would say the next pitch that also isn't as useful is either one that's not timely or, you know, God bless the White House, but sometimes they'll give us a pitch and literally give us 15 minutes to respond. And if we don't respond that quickly, they'll say, never mind, the slot's gone. And so that's difficult as well. So the pitches that I appreciate the most, and again, people have to understand what I do. I don't just cover national politics. I cover national politics. I cover Washington for a Georgia audience. So I am not really interested in pitches that are general that can't be applied to Georgia. Now, a lot of things can be applied to Georgia, but, you know, so if a national entity is pitching me, do you want to talk to a doctor? If that doctor is based in New York, my answer is still no. If you say, do you want to talk to this doctor on this very relevant healthcare issue, and the doctor is based in Georgia, then that might be a little bit different for me. So it's really about pitches that are timely, that are relevant to my beat, but also relevant to my readership. And that, again, my readership is Georgia. Someone else in a different publication will have a different readership. So the pitch has to keep both the reporter's beat and the reporter's readership in mind.
Before we go to Amy, do you know most of the people who are pitching you? Or you did say you get errant pitches that have nothing to do with your beat, which really surprises me. I didn't think in a major publication like yours, people would still be pitching the wrong things to you that often.
Well, like I said, a lot of it I think is just like emails to like big lists. It's
Right.
not really to me. It's a form email. But I will say I get pitches, and one thing it's for me, the other thing, and I know this is probably maddening to like the folks who are making the pitches, but different reporters have different preferences. Like I hate getting pitches in Twitter DM. But when I get them, what I usually say is, please email me. Twitter DM's not very searchable. There's no way to mark it unread once it's read. It's just like, if you want me to take your pitch seriously, don't DM it. But that's me. So a different reporter might not have as a version to it. But like recently, so like people do pitch that I don't necessarily have a long-standing relationship with. It does help if they're representing an entity or a cause that I'm familiar with, and again, that can be, hey, I'm a voting rights organization. I know you've written on voting rights. Let me explain to you what we're pitching and why we think this might be a good person to talk to or a good article. So, I don't always know the person, but usually there's something that I can connect it to.
Great. Amy, same sort of question, except that you are in a very different situation. I'm sure most of the people who are watching this broadcast know you, or certainly know of you, certainly know of Cablefax Daily if they don't read it every day, which is probably a little bit different from Tia in that, you're a trade. So you're getting a kind of a specialized niche pitch. What makes a good pitch for you? And do you get a lot of errant pitches still?
Yeah. Well, it's funny. I think every reporter has those weird, it just must be an email blast dump of bizarre pitches that we get that are totally not relevant. For months, I got this pitch about a guy who would walk his kid to school every day, and he wrote a book about it. And I mean, it was in my inbox, like once a week, I got a different pitch for this book, but I don't know. They must be hiring a bad PR firm to just blast it to everyone. But most of the pitches I get are pretty relevant. There's some where people don't, Cablefax, they think, well, I've got this amplifier or whatever. We don't really get into products, but it doesn't mean it's a complete no. If you can come to me with a story behind it, like this company is using it and it reduced their cost, or that's probably a better pitch for something like that. I do know a lot of people, but certainly not everyone. And kind of like Tia was saying, if you're with an entity, with a company that I cover or know, then it's fine. I don't know you because I know your company. I think one of the things that really, really helps people stand out when they're dealing with me or any of our reporters is if you are reaching out with a press release that you're emailing to everyone, just taking the time to say hi, or hey, here's something that's not in the release that I thought would be helpful to you. I love when someone does that, even if it's maybe not really that important, but the fact that you made me feel like you wanted to give me something more, that always really helps. On the Twitter DM, it's really funny. I agree. I do not like to get pitches on the Twitter. In fact, I kept mine open because sometimes, someone wants to reach out to you, but don't ever tweet the letters NFT on Twitter, because if you write about NFTs, you get so many like spam bot DMs. But I will say DMs are where my inside sources kind of come to me. They're like, hey, did you hear this? So if you have slid into my DMs and we talk that way, then you are a good source that I am using you in that light. I don't know, did I answer all your questions, Seth?
Yeah, absolutely. Kristen, now you've heard Tia and Amy unload on your profession. I know you don't speak for the entire PR industry, but you know that reporters get a lot of errant pitches. What do you do, or what's your philosophy when pitching people? I mean, we talked yesterday, and I know you said essentially, to boil it down, is less is more.
Yeah, I always, I mean, as I'm listening to you guys, I'm like, I hope I've never been that person, but I do think a lot of it is, a little bit of baptism by fire when you first get into media relations. You're younger, you're learning from a boss, you're kind of following their directions. So if you have a boss who wants you to send a blast pitch to 100 reporters, at some point, maybe you grow enough to feel confident enough to say, I don't think this is effective. And I think it's more effective if I research and find 2 or 3, people where this could be a perfect fit for them. And also just respecting the reporter's time, like Tia said, like you guys don't have all the time in the world. You're often working under tight deadlines, and just trying to not give you stuff that's total spam. Because none of us like that, right? None of us like receiving an email where you're like, how the heck did this get in my inbox? And you never want to be that guy or gal. Because at some point I would imagine, and Tia and Amy would be able to confirm, but I would imagine at some point, if you get enough, garbage pitches from someone, you probably quit opening their emails. It's like, well, I got 10 emails from Kristen, nothing was relevant. Maybe my next email was the perfect story, but maybe you disregarded it because I've been sending you stuff not relevant to your beat at all prior.
So what happens if a client comes to you and says, Kristen, I want 100 pitches to reporters today on this press release? Do you tell them? I mean, depending on how well you know the client, you might say, that's probably not a great strategy. Do you do that?
I do. I've had clients that most clients understand this is your forte, this is your job. They don't tell their attorneys, they don't give them, tell them what to do as far as with a legal document. So it's like, let me show you what to do with a press release. I mean, even a press release, to me, at that point, you're sending that to a broader group of people than you would, a smaller bit of the story. Maybe you give someone an exclusive, because I always like to try to give someone something that the whole group doesn't have. So if a press release goes out saying that, one of my clients is, launching a new apprenticeship training program or something, I might send it pretty far and wide just as kind of like an FYI, but then there might be a handful of reporters that I know are very interested in that and want to talk to some of the students or some of the instructors at the apprenticeship training program. So I basically try to tell them, I'm not saying it's always, you can definitely get a tough client that thinks, my way or the highway. And it's, it is difficult to thread that needle, but I think at some point they start to agree with you if you can show them over time some results and say, look, we did this way. That if they can give you that, if they can give you some time, you can show them that your way is more effective.
What's the toughest in terms of media relations? What's the toughest conversation that you have with a client? Is it don't pitch to 100 people randomly and blindly, or is it, Mr. Smith, this news that you have here that you want me to pitch, it's very important to you, but it's not going to be important to the readers of Amy Maclean or Tia Mitchell. Is that a harder? And do you have that conversation a lot?
Yeah, it's tough. I would say, the clients I'm working with now are pretty, I don't know, they're straight shooters. I think that we don't have to, I'm laughing to myself because I'm thinking of certain clients in the past. And it is, you do have some conversations that you're like, I can't believe this conversation is happening right now, but kind of like just a fun little side story. I at some point placed an op-ed in a large daily for a client, and the client came back like, well, they want to use it on Saturday. Well, I want them to use it on Sunday instead. And I'm like, yeah, that doesn't work. And, it's so hard to get something placed in the Post or the Times or the Wall Street Journal. It's like, if you want to risk losing that, and I had to have a very lengthy conversation, had to pull in other people even to explain that's just not how it works. And that's happened a few times, things like that, where you just have to say, look, we don't control the media. We do the best we can to, make the client happy. But at the end of the day, you can have a client in the green room with their makeup on, and they might say, hey, we're not having them on the show. And it's not, it's totally out of your control, but those conversations are very difficult.
There's a question that was prompted by a survey that I saw about journalism and pitching. And I think it's really relevant to probably to both Amy and Tia. And that is this, a common trend in pitching now is to say, oh, hi, Tia, loved your last story. And, maybe, we'll give you a link to that story. Sometimes it is your story. Sometimes it's not, by the way. But people who try to pitch you by intimating that they know you well. That was for obvious reasons today with security and online security and all kinds of things like that. It was the top issue in one of the surveys that I saw that journalists are upset with from pitching. What are your thoughts on that, Tia? Do you get that? Do you get that type of pitch? And I'd like you and Amy to talk about even people going deeper than that. As Amy said, getting onto my DM. How did they get onto your DM? Do you always want them on your DM? What if it's somebody you really don't want on that DM? Talk about that, Tia and Amy.
I'll go first.
Yeah.
Number one, I agree with Amy that I do talk to sources in DM, you know what I mean? But those are usually people that I have some type of rapport or relationship with. It's not usually, or sometimes people will just flag and say, hey, did the AJC see this? Or, something quick. And I might say, oh, thank you, so casual conversations do happen in the DM, and that's fine. And sometimes that does help because you meet people. I'm pretty active on Twitter. Sounds like Amy is as well. So you are interacting with people and building, those virtual relationships with potential sources. I do think to an extent, sometimes you can tell when someone either if it's a form letter, it's very well done. But those pitches that are like, hey, Tia, I see you written in the past about this. Therefore, would you be interested in covering that? I have received those pitches, and it does help, quite frankly, me give it a second look, because it does at least, again, that relevance factor. It does at least portray that they put some thought into the fact that, like, this is something that Tia might write about based on her past coverage, which is a very key thing that when I've talked to, people who pitch stories in the past, I say, look and see what writers are covering the things that fall in line with what you're pitching, so you do pitch the right person. So those type of pitches do insinuate they've done that type of homework, so that goes a long way. It doesn't bother me, but again, sometimes, like you said, it doesn't automatically get the pitch through the door either, because sometimes they'll say, I see you wrote that. And I'm like, no, I didn't actually. No, I don't write about that. So, and again, I just tried to, like, quickly, when you were asking the question, see if I could find an example in my inbox. And, like, just in the past 30 minutes, I've probably received about 10 unsolicited emails. And the first one that came, that's a Dear Tia, is like a general pitch from a university about its some professors that can talk about threat to democracy. Not a bad pitch, because could I write about threat to democracy at some point and maybe go back to this email? Sure. Is it a university in Georgia? No. So is it less likely for me? Yes. But I'm not mad at it, but it's also like, in case you ever write about threat to democracy, it's nothing that creates an urgency that says, hey, here's what we think you should be doing right now, and here's how we can facilitate it. So then it goes into, like, it stays in my inbox, and you got to hope that at some point I need it later and come back to it.
Amy, same sort of question. Do pitchers ever go over the line with you? Has that happened? And other reporters that you've worked with, does that happen? How do you deal with it?
It's funny because if you're going to click on a story I wrote, that makes me happy. I mean, we want clicks, right? So I actually find it interesting that the poll said that people had problems with it. I do get that sometimes, where I see you wrote about this, and as long as it actually does correlate, I appreciate that, because they actually took a minute to do a little bit of research before blasting out something. I do think I have had some weird stuff where I felt like crossed the line. I've had phone calls at my house. I don't even know how they had my home phone number. I don't think they maybe even meant to be calling I don't know, but it was very weird. Facebook is a weird thing. I do have some PR people that I am friends with on Facebook. And those are people who I truly feel like we have a relationship. If I, wasn't in this job, I still want to know what they're doing and see pictures of their families or whatever. But if I don't really know you and then you reach out to me on Facebook, it's actually uncomfortable and awkward, because I don't want to say no. I just kind of leave you in that limbo land of never clicking accept or decline. And I'm sorry if anyone here is in that state. So I think you kind of have to know the line. I think Facebook is truly for someone personally. Maybe in the beginning days, we didn't know what we were doing, but I'm trying to think if there were any other. Oh, and I will say, this is, Seth, you had to write letters from the editor for magazines, they can be very difficult, and you really spend a lot of time kind of coming up with something. So if you want to reach a journalist and make them like happy, read that ed letter and reference it. Like, I saw you're a fan of X or whatever. That is a great way to stroke that ego a little bit and show them that you spent some time finding out a little bit about them.
Kristen, a variation on what Amy just brought up. One of the things that people bring up a lot as a new trend in pitching is just what Amy said, and that is going on their Facebook page, going on their Twitter, going on their Instagram, and, for example, seeing that Tia collects antique pictures in her spare time. And you go there and, you haven't been able to break through to get to Tia, and you've got this good story you want to pitch on something, not about antique, pictures, but you say to Tia, hey Tia, love those antique pictures on your Facebook page. I have the same hobby, Hey, by the way, my client is doing X, Y, and Z. Does that work? Are people doing that? Is that one of the new trends in pitching? Is that something you would suggest?
I can't help but think it just sounds a little creepy. I think, same as Amy, I have plenty of friends, like we talked about earlier, yesterday, reporters are people. So like at some point, if you deal with a particular, reporter, editor, whatever it may be, you might become friends because, maybe you do go out to lunch and you start to know each other on a personal level. So that's a little different, but I would say it would take a true, like if I somehow, and I wouldn't stalk Tia to find this out, but if I somehow, serendipitously discovered that Tia loved antique photos and maybe that was genuinely like one of my favorite pastimes is going to, collect antique photos. To me, that would be a little different because it would be like, wow, I mean, we do have this really significant connection, but I would never stalk her to find that out. And I would never, I don't know, try to use that to then push a story that makes no sense for her, if that makes sense. I think it goes back to the authenticity thing. It's like, are you really trying to make a connection because you have this shared interest? Or are you trying to like guilt her into writing a story that doesn't make sense for her? And I think what I usually tell clients in that case is like, you don't want a reporter who writes on anything you pitch them to be, that's not the best reporter. You want someone who's tough and who's, knows what they want, knows what they don't want.
I just wanted to throw this out because this was interesting to me. This person I do not know. They pitched me really regularly, but I've never really had a phone conversation or anything. And then they started talking about in their pitches, like, by the way, I took up this hobby, and they're telling me this personal information, and they've been including photos of the hobby. And at first I was like, okay, but I kind of like it a little bit. I'm like, all right, it's interesting. They're taking a little time to try to share about themselves. It was funny to see it flipped in the reverse.
Yeah, no,
I was going to make that point. Like, to me, there's a difference between someone making a pitch that's kind of a one-off or not someone who I talk to regularly versus a source that is someone I'm regularly hearing from, regularly interacting with. And yes, we are more likely to, go to coffee or go to lunch or have conversations and have those opportunities to, share commonalities that will help us improve our working relationship. But I don't need that from like somebody who I don't talk to that often. I personally don't want that. I don't need your bird pictures. But, I appreciate all the very focused and relevant pitches you send me. But the bird pictures and the family pictures are kind of part of the job when you are establishing a deeper connection with the source.
Tia and Amy, quickly, top things or top characteristics of a good pitch for you. Tia, what's one or two things that you get a pitch and, oh, yeah, that's what I'm going to write about. What does it have in it? And what does it look like?
So for me, because I cover politics, and the people who are often pitching me are either like members of our delegation or White House staff, or sometimes, a government or public entity that needs government funds or whatever. And usually it's that timeliness factor, that exclusivity that I think we talked about before, where it's like, we'll give this to the AJC and let you guys have first dibs or whatever. And again, that it has to know our AJC readership, and it has to also know, like, what do I do, so that it fits both. To me, those three things: exclusivity, and it doesn't have to be we're giving it to the AJC first, but what are you giving us that other people might not have that makes this an article we should write that'll be different than what's already out there about this topic? So exclusivity, relevant to my audience, relevant to my beat. Those are the three components of a great pitch.
Amy, jump in there. I'd like to hear what you think about length and the length of an email pitch. Does it matter?
Well, I would echo everything Tia said, but I would also add access. I think that's really important to me, is giving me an executive, not just, and someone pretty high up is what I'm looking for. And that can be very challenging. I feel like, I don't know. And that's why I'm wondering if Kristen can maybe weigh in on what to do to get more executives willing to get out there and talk. But in terms of the pitch itself, I mean, getting right to the point, don't give me flowery writing and cutesy little, just direct. I actually am okay with phone calls sometimes I prefer email mostly, but if it's important, like if you literally, like my CEO is willing to talk to you and you haven't responded to my email, it's, call me or whatever, because I do get, I'm not exaggerating to say I get hundreds and hundreds of emails a day. I miss things sometimes. So, yeah.
Kristen, you want to weigh in there about what things that you like to put in a pitch and things that have worked for you?
So one thing I've always actually struggled with is the length of a pitch, because, I'll be honest, sometimes you do have a really good story to share, and maybe you have, like, I'm thinking of one story that I did in Miami, and we really had a lot to share as far as like our attorneys had been, FOIAing a bunch of information. We just had a lot of good stuff. And it was like, how do I show this to the right reporter? And we'd already kind of identified who it was, and I'd already talked to her at some point, but it was like, how do I write her an email where she has enough to start, but not enough to overwhelm her? And it is tough. And I think some of it to me is, maybe like make the initial pitch, like, and I think a lot of times, I don't stick to, like, writing an op-ed is very different from writing a pitch, I think. And Amy and Tia can tell me if I'm wrong, but if I can put a couple bullets and that makes it easier to digest, or if I can, bold someone's name, or, something to where it's like boom, 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 very direct, and not just like 3 or 4 paragraphs. Sometimes I think that's the way I try to craft a pitch, so it's a little easier to digest that way. But I agree also with the phone call. There's nothing, the only thing better than a phone call would be human connection. But I think if you can get someone on the phone, if you really genuinely know that this story is a great fit for them, that I do think a phone call is the best way to go as far as kind of sealing the deal, making sure they saw it.
Go ahead, Tia.
Yeah, I have some thoughts about the logistics. Number one, when I get an email pitch, even if it's relevant, always put everything in the body of an email. So yes, you do want to keep it concise. Media advisories, if it's something that can be done who, what, when, where, put it in media advisory form. Don't think you have to put it in press release form. If it is a longer press release, put a summary, type a regular email at the top saying, hey, Tia, we're doing this big event at the National Armory on Wednesday. It's about veterans healthcare. See our press release below, signed Kristen, and then put the whole longer press release below so I can get the gist at the top, and then the longer piece later. You can attach the press release, that's fancy and cute, that's fine. Still put it in the body in just regular form, because sometimes we're not clicking on that attachment. If we can't scroll because we're on our phone. Mm-hmm. So if you can't scroll and see it in the body, we might not ever see it.
Yeah, amen to all of that. And also, I hate PDF press releases. If you are going to attach a press release, I really would prefer it be a Word document. It's way easier for me to deal with.
You know what's funny? I always feel like, and I don't know who told me this, but I always put press releases in the body of an email, but I have so many clients that when they want to send it to a few of their own contacts, or maybe they have it, they tend to do the attachment, and I'm like, it's just one more thing for them to click on and download. And to your point, Tia, you're on your phone, maybe you're picking up your kid, it's like, they're not always sitting in front of a computer, and you're not a trusted source maybe, so who knows what you're downloading.
And yeah, and now there's software that flags external emails. So you're right. If you're not a trusted source, we're really not clicking on it. But if we don't get in the body of an email why we should click, it just says, hey, see attached, we're definitely not clicking on it. Put it in the body. Put the whole press release in the body. But again, summarize it at the top so that there is something concise. Again, this is me. Don't call me unless you know me, or unless the pitch, to Amy's, if you have the CEO of Coca-Cola, which is based in Atlanta, ready to break some news, then you can call me. If this is the pitch, if you sent the pitch to 50 people and you've signed an intern to follow up with 50 phone calls, you are wasting your time. And the intern is getting cussed out by, I don't cuss at the intern, but I'm annoyed when the intern calls me, I'll be honest. But some people, and I mean, I'm being a little bit dramatic, but like those phone calls, if the phone call is just to say, making sure you got our email, don't have that junior person call us. We are annoyed. If the phone call is a genuine, hey, I think this is really good, I haven't heard back in case you missed it, that's better, but there should probably be a little bit of rapport, or again, very high relevance, or again, that phone call, it's like with anything else, like we are busy, we're getting a lot of emails, we're getting a lot of pitches, and that phone call is easy to be annoying.
Since we're talking about do's and don'ts here, I like this one. You get a pitch, you get a press release, let's say right now, today, and it's a story you want to follow up, and you have a contact there, and you type them, you email them back, and you get an automatic email saying, Jane Smith is on vacation today. Call us back tomorrow. What do you do? What happens when you see that, Amy? Do you
someone pitching me? Wait, someone pitched me? Someone pitched me and I get that? I don't know that I've ever gotten that on a pitch. I certainly would hope that they would have called this person instead. I mean, the chances that, I think Tia can say like a lot, so many pitches you don't respond to. So I think I would be pretty shocked, and I don't know that I would spend much time on it, frankly, because it's pretty rare I reply to a pitch. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know that I've experienced that.
All right, Tia, we talked about this yesterday in the pre-call, and I loved your answer, so I'd like to go over it again. What do you suggest people do to get on your, to become really trusted sources with you when they promise an interview with the CEO, and a few minutes before the interview is supposed to happen, Kristen calls you up and say, hey, the CEO was called into a board meeting. She can't talk with you at 1 o'clock today. What do you suggest her next sentence be?
I suggest, things happen, emergencies happen. To me, that's not something that I would hold against the person who's my contact. But the best thing in that situation would be to already have a plan B ready to go. So you're not just calling up to say, Chairman Smith isn't available. You're saying Chairman Smith isn't available as we had planned, but Co-Chairman Brown is going to be on the call at that appointed time. We're just shifting the person, and it's the next best thing. Or Chairman Smith isn't available anymore, but I'm working on some written comments or a written statement that will be on the record from Chairman Smith that you can quote. I'll have it within the next hour or whatever, and again, it's not the same thing, but the fact that Chairman Smith isn't available, but what's your deadline? Is there any way you can give me until tomorrow? I can reschedule you with Chairman Smith tomorrow. Like, that is what I would hope is all part of that conversation.
Right. Good point. Kristen, is it getting harder to get through to journalists like Amy and Tia, or is it about the same? Is it easier? You have tons of tools to get to them. Is it harder, easier, or about the same as it was, let's say, before the pandemic?
I would say about the same. I think I think, human connection, I kind of place that above all. Like, if I get to have lunch with you, Seth, I find that just to be not just much more enjoyable, but also, just think of all the, cute, like, there's nothing that Zoom can't ever replace an in-person meeting, in my opinion. Like, when I hear about, even the metaverse and whatnot, I'm just like, I'm one of those people that's like telling my friends' kids, like, go outside and play. Like, so I think COVID made things a little harder, maybe because you weren't getting together with people like you normally would. But the reporters that I'm sitting down with, those are usually ones that, we already have some sort of friendship, and we would grab a drink or grab coffee anyway. And then in some instances throughout COVID, I was still able to, like the issue in Miami, for instance, I was still able to actually sit down with that person because she and I had talked on the phone so much that at some point it made sense for her to, come to a meeting where we were going to be and do the in-person thing, obviously with mask and all. But I would say about the same.
Okay. Amy, Kristen, you asked Kristen before, or you asked for her to weigh in, and we'll let her weigh in, but you said maybe Kristen can weigh in on how to get more CEOs and senior executives to talk to us. So Kristen, think of an answer there, but I'm going to go to Amy, and Kristen calls you up, Amy, and says, I do have a CEO for you, but she wants to speak on background. Do you want to talk a little bit about background, Amy, and off the record and things like that? And would you take that call? Would you take that interview with the CEO that Kristen is offering you, but it's on background, or maybe it's off the record?
Yeah, I would totally take that call, because that person is, and the difference is background is stuff I can use. I just can't really attribute to them. Off the record, I can't do anything with it, but I know it, right? I know that they said it. I definitely, because that's intelligence that helps me as a reporter. I probably would push back a little bit and say, oh, I would love to have that. I'd love to talk to them. And, maybe we can follow up. Or sometimes we'll do an interview like that, that's all off the record or on background. And then I will reach back and say, they made this point, and I thought this was such a great point that would be really helpful to our readers. Is it okay if we put this on the record? So that's just a negotiating tactic that I feel like 100% I'd always take that call. And if it's an executive maybe who is new to the media and a little bit shy, and maybe that's a way to get them out, go for it. I would be 100% down with that. I just wanted to, back to the point about the Zoom calls, I'm just curious to hear everyone's take. But before COVID, my interviews were on the phone. I didn't do all these Zoom calls unless it was someone in HR. HR people always wanted to do Zoom. But now I can't, I have to have a video chat with every conversation. And I will say that I miss just having a phone call, because you've got to download it. Is it working? Are they on mute? I don't always look so pretty, I don't know.
What's your feeling on that, Tia? Do you do a lot of Zoom interviews, or do you do a lot of, do you do off the record interviews? Do you do background? Tell us about what you like to do?
So it depends for me. Like, if it's a new source that I'm trying to build a rapport with, like a candidate for office who's likely to win and be someone that I cover, I will try to do at least one Zoom. So, that we can actually feel a little bit more that we're getting to know each other. We're looking at each other face to face. Because again, a lot of those sources are in Georgia, I'm here. So it really depends on the source, but in general, if it's just a routine, this is someone I know, they know me, and I just need to interview them for an article, I'm going to just do a phone call. I generally don't like talking off the record. You know, legacy media like the AJC, like most established daily newspapers, we frown upon anonymous sourcing. And quite frankly, if you go off the record, I can't use it. Again, the theme is don't waste my time. So like, if I'm talking to you for 30 minutes and none of it's usable, that's 30 minutes I could have spent talking to someone who's going to let me quote them. So, you know, sometimes you can't get around it, but, you know, that to me is something that I try as much to limit those types of interviews. On background, as you all know, the White House loves to do briefings on background. Campaigns love to give you information on background. Just say it came from the campaign. Don't attribute it to a specific person. So that's kind of like, it's not my favorite, but that's just like comes with the territory. It's part of just kind of how the business is done. So I'll work within that. But yeah, in general, I don't hate Zooms, but Zoom doesn't have to me, the Zoom should serve a purpose of you wanting to make a deeper connection. If it's an interview, to me, Zoom is to get to know someone versus just an interview. If it's just an interview, it can be by phone.
Right. Kristen, so you've had a little bit of time to think about Amy's question. How do you get a CEO to talk to Amy? Let's say the CEO, you've loosened her up. She'll talk to Amy, but she'll talk to her on background only. Do you say, okay, that's good enough, we'll do that? Or do you say, look, you know, I trust Amy. She's worked with me for years. She's going to quote you accurately. Don't talk to her on background. Go on the record. What do you do? And how do you get that CEO to loosen up to talk with Amy or Tia?
So, you know, I would be honest. I would be candid. If it was a reporter that I'd worked with before, and I felt that they were, you know, fair, and I felt that the conversation could be really helpful, you know, for both the client and the ultimately for the story, I would say, you know, I do recommend that you open up a little and coach them as to, because some of them are just scared because they've never done it,
Right.
or, you know, because attorneys have kind of, you know, and they're doing their job because, you know, it's funny because like I joke around with some of the attorneys I work with and I'm like, you know, you're doing your job at keeping us out of trouble. And then I'm kind of like pushing a little and they're kind of telling us, okay, yeah, we can use that messaging. We can't really use that. But I think to Tia's point, my theme also is don't waste the time of the reporter, because I know that's the quickest way for us to not get what we want out of it. And if it is a story that needs to be told, how are they going to tell it if you don't give them what they need? So sometimes what I've done, and sometimes it's not even that the person is scared to go on the record, they just feel like they feel intimidated when the entire conversation is on the record. So sometimes I even will say to the reporter, would you mind if this is on background? And then obviously we'll give you quotes, you know, if you want something from them, just let them know, because sometimes that makes them feel a little more comfortable, like they'll open up a little more and then give you something that way. But I always do try to have them, I always try to push them a little bit, because I feel like, again, why are you pitching a reporter if you're not willing to help them bring this story to light?
Yeah, no, I hear you. What about exclusives? Do you recommend using exclusives to get Amy and Tia interested? Or since, you know, Amy's in a situation, and Tia is too, where, you know, there are a plethora of publications that are writing similar stories. Do you want to single out Tia for an exclusive today, and then, you know, tomorrow give an exclusive to one of her competitors? How do you do that? What's your thinking on that?
It depends on if what you have is a true story. I think if you're putting together a press release because your client, you know, is donating money to a library, you know, something, that's not something you give I mean, I don't think anybody would want that exclusive. Like, correct me if I'm wrong, you guys, but
No.
that's not a story. It's like, if I have a story where I feel like the person we give this to is really going to do something with it, and this is the right person, I will offer it as an exclusive. Sometimes it's a matter of like, time is of the essence, so please let us know like in the next 24 hours, just so I can respect my clients' time. But I always tell my clients, like, one of the first things I tell them is, I'm not in the business of like, spinning things. I don't think that that's what PR should be. I don't like using that word, spinning something. So if I feel like, that authenticity, again, it's like, if it is a good story, I do feel like Tia would be the perfect fit for it. I do love offering it as an exclusive, because I do think that matters. It makes it seem as though you've done your homework and you're giving them something that you really do feel like would be the perfect fit for them. If they turn you down, maybe you shoot it off to a few more reporters, or maybe you have 2 more in mind. But I do like initially trying to pitch it as an exclusive, because you also tend to get a better story that way.
Okay. Let's do some do's and don'ts for interviews. Tia, things that if you could whisper into Kristen's ear, her client came to you and you did an interview, and you saw some things that she did well, or maybe she didn't do so well. What would you tell her? Amy, the same question. And before you go, Tia, before you answer that, I think I should say that we would love to get questions from our audience. I don't believe I've seen any, so please chime in on the chat here if you have questions or comments. But Tia, back to the question for you. What makes a good interview? A person who interviews well, and by the same token, what are a couple of things that you've seen people do in interviews that you thought, oh my goodness, their PR person should really not let them do this?
So I think in general, being prepared and being able to not speak in, like, the worst interviews are the people who feel like they're reading off a piece of paper or they're reading prepared remarks. Those things, if you're going to read off a piece of paper, you might as well just email me your quote. But your quote's going to be much better if you just talk to me like a regular person. Don't talk to me as you're going to be quoted and you're being very careful in your words. Just talk regular and it'll be better. The article will be better. You'll come across not like a robot. And then, but you also do have to be prepared. So there's nothing wrong with prepping with your Kristen. There's nothing wrong with having some background materials with you so you can reference them, or having some talking points. Like, I get it, it's important and you want to do a good job, but just don't be too rehearsed, but also don't be too cautious. Like, I get it that some people are wary of the media and what's our angle, and if you don't want to sound stupid in the paper. I get those concerns, but like, if you're too mechanical and too buttoned up, then that really translates. And one of the but at the same time, I understand that you're not used to doing media interviews for the most part. Most people I interview aren't the CEO of Coca-Cola or John Ossoff or Raphael Warnock, who are very polished. And so part of our job, Amy and I, is to help you get comfortable and to talk you through it and to do the interview in a way where we can make sure you're comfortable and it becomes a conversation. And, that's part of a journalism skill. That's part of our interviewing skills. That being said, we have seen it all. Senator Loeffler, she was a US Senator. She was a terrible, terrible speaker, terrible at interviewing because she was so mechanical and buttoned up. She got a little better with time, but starting out, her quotes were terrible. She was terrible. And she was a US Senator. And I didn't go around saying, I didn't go back. Her people know, so it's not like I had to tell them anything, but I had to work with it and try to help her get comfortable and try to help her see me and know that, like, I'm not trying to play gotcha. I'm just trying to ask you some questions. So we work with it.
Amy, something that you do to make people comfortable when you're interviewing them. If they don't know you, or if you don't, maybe you don't know them.
Well, I hopefully just talk. I mean, I think that's true. When you deal with someone super scripted, that would be my number one issue as well. I was going to add that if it's an interview you've set up ahead of time, that you've done a bunch of things to get this set up, the person needs to be on a good connection, whether it's phone or internet. I mean, you set it up days in advance. This shouldn't be running to the soccer beat on the cell phone. I mean, we all have those times when we have that, but if it's something you've set up way ahead of time, get on a good connection. Yeah, I know we're almost out of time, so I don't want to keep going. But yeah.
Okay, I want to entertain Rob Stoddard's question about the metaverse. Whether we'll conduct interviews and other media relations in the metaverse. Kristen, I can tell you that engineers right now are working on spokespeople, avatar spokespeople to handle a PR crisis. I know that. And should they be male? Should they be female? How young or old should they be? What should be their ethnicity? What language should they speak? So, I mean, it's not that far away, I don't think. And if I could just get you to comment on one thing, let's say you're in a PR crisis. Let's say, God forbid, you represent an airline and a plane goes down, let's say in a far off place. You're headquartered in Minneapolis, let's say. The plane crashes in somewhere in Indonesia, and your CEO is AWOL. You don't know where she is. What about 3 in the morning? You have a program that you can create a metaverse spokesperson to give some basic information. Would you think that's a terrible thing to do, or do you think that's just another good tool for PR for in your toolkit?
So I know that, like, I'm 35 and I love actual newspapers. So I'm like an old soul. So to me, it sounds crazy. And I'm almost like, how could anyone take that person seriously? But with that being said, I probably never would have guessed I think digital marketing and the way you can target, that blows me away. So do I think it's going to happen? Absolutely. Will I be one of the first ones recommending that to clients? No.
Well, I don't understand. So if I'm a reporter and I have to be up at 3 a.m. covering the story, but the company involved doesn't have to be, they could just send out an avatar. I would find that.
I wonder, like, I kind of feel awkward too. How do I tell Amy or Tia, you're going to be dealing with client X's virtual like, to me, I just feel so odd. I can't even say it. I can't even put together that sentence. So I don't know. Like I said, there's nothing to me that can replace human interaction. To me, there's nothing that can replace newspapers and actual books. But I do think, to Rob's point, people are already buying houses and things. All of this is crazy to me. I sat next to a guy on the plane recently talking about how I should be investing. And I'm like, buddy, you are talking to the wrong person, because what you're saying right now is just over my head, I think. So, but yeah, I think it'll happen.
Yeah, there are places like a tour of a facility or whatever. Yeah. That could be really cool. Like, that makes sense.
Yeah, like maybe there's something where it brings you in, he or she introduces you to the new program, whatever it is, but to give you an actual quote, I would never use it to respond to a crisis. That would be, like you mentioned, a plane going down. I think that would be so disrespectful to, like, I would say that CEO needs to step up. We've got people that have lost family members and we're going to have them respond with a spokesperson on the metaverse. Like, no, I don't think that would fly.
I was merely suggesting, basic details in a language, that people can understand, and just as a tool, not as something you go to all the time. But anyway, we've run out of time with real reporters and real PR people. Amy Maclean from Cablefax Daily, Kristen Thomaselli, and Tia Mitchell from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. Thank you so much, and thank you for WICT for having us. We could keep talking for hours, I'm sure. And
so we have deadlines.
Yes, we all have stuff to do. I hope everybody watching and listening got some good tips from the three of these wonderful journalists and PR people today. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, everyone, for participating. Thanks for being on for attending. We hope you can join us at our wonderful Power Brokers Breakfast, the Touchstone of Leadership Awards. The ceremony is coming up in just a couple weeks. It's November 3rd at the Press Club in Washington, D.C. And there's an exciting keynote speaker. It's Danita Johnson, President of Business Operations at DC United. There's live music from the Ellington Carthen Trio, and we'll be honoring 9 inspiring leaders. So visit wictdcvault.org to get registered, and I hope to see you there.
Great.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Bye.